Comincerei come al solito. Buonasera a tutti, sono Paolo Ravazzani, il direttore dell'Istituto di Elettronica ed Ingegneria dell'Informazione e Comunicazioni del Consiglio Nazionale delle Ricerche, e siamo qui per un nuovo giovedì di EIT, giovedì con EIT. Oggi abbiamo il piacere di ospitare il professor Luis Camarinha-Matos, a cui fra poco darò la parola facendo partire tutto l'evento. Non faccio perdere più tempo, dico solo una parola come sempre ricordando a tutti i partecipanti che l'evento è registrato e che copia dell'evento verrà poi pubblicata sulla nostra pagina YouTube. Detto questo, ringraziando di nuovo il professor Luis Camarinha-Matos, lascio la parola a Rosanna Fornasiero per introdurre il professore e tutta la giornata. Grazie a tutti.
So good afternoon everybody. So thank you very much for being here and to participate to this webinar. First of all, I would like to thank Luis for accepting to participate to our series of webinars where we try to keep the community alive. We try to create a new way of doing collaborative networks. Now we can study these cases as new collaborative networks managed in a remote way. And I thank all the participants for accepting this invitation. And so, as usual, we have the presentation from the speaker, from the invited speaker, and then we have one session with question and answers. Briefly, some words about Luis. He is a full professor at the Nova University of Lisbon. He is director of the Center of Technology and Systems at the university, and he is leader of the research group related to collaborative networks and distributed industrial systems. We know each other since a few years because he is the organizer of the Prof conference. It's the conference on virtual enterprises that he started, I think, 20 years ago, and he is the chair of the conference. We have been chair together of the conference when we have organized it in Vicenza at the University of Padova, in the premises of the university in Vicenza. And the conference is part of the IFIP conferences, and he is also president of the SoCalNet group society. SoCalNet is a society for collaborative networks. I think he will say something later. And he was chair of the IFIP working group, the 5.5 on virtual enterprises. His main areas of interest are collaborative enterprise networks, and this afternoon I think he will focus his speech on this topic as a topic that tried to put together several different areas, scientific areas, where we can find studies and research both in the engineering area, management area, involving several different applications. And changing also now, this is a topic that is also changing with the increasing importance of the digital transformation that is getting more and more important, and that is enabling different types of collaborative networks. So I think I can give the floor to Luis, and so the floor is yours. Thank you very much again, Luis.
Thank you very much, Rosanna, for this nice introduction. I'm really pleased to be here, so thank you for the invitation. So I have a difficult task because Rosanna asked me to talk about several topics this afternoon, but considering the amount of time that I have, I can only briefly touch some of them. Nevertheless, my plan is to present three main topics. So initially I will briefly give a very short overview of what is collaborative networks, what is involved in this area. Then I will try to show you how collaborative networks can have an important role in Industry 4.0 and digital transformation. And finally, I would also briefly show you some of the activities that we are doing in my group in this area. So let me see if this works. I mentioned to Rosanna that I'm not familiar with this platform, but let's see. Okay, so Rosanna already said most of the information I had here about myself. Just to say that I'm located near Lisbon. So Lisbon is on one side of the river. My university is on the south side of the river in let's say, a campus that is for the engineering and technology. And in this campus, we have the Faculty or School of Science and Technology, and we also have the UNINOVA Institute that perhaps some of you are familiar with. And so I work in this campus, and besides teaching and doing research, and I also have a lot of, let's say, management activities, since I am the coordinator of a research center, and I'm also the coordinator of the PhD program on electrical and computer engineering. And as Rosanna also mentioned, I've been involved in international societies and also conferences like the Prof conference, and I also I'm running annual conference for PhD students, that is the DOSES conference. Just a few words about my research center. So it's the Center of Technology and Systems. The main topic that we are aiming at is cognitive and collaborative cyber-physical systems, and we try to give in this kind of cube a global perspective of the areas that we address. So as you can see, we address cyber-physical systems from a very comprehensive perspective, from the devices level to intelligent systems, systems of systems, up to cognitive and collaborative systems. That is mostly the part that interests me. My own research interests are located here. But in our research center, we have people with expertise that goes from electronic systems up to the high level of networking of enterprises, robotics, manufacturing. And in terms of applications, most of our projects and activities are related to manufacturing and energy systems, but we also do activities in healthcare and space industry, transportation, and so on. So this is just a very brief overview of the context. Just to tell you that this center has around, at the moment, 76 doctors in engineering, and we also have around 100, so these numbers change every year, so between 80 and 120. In fact, at this moment exactly, we have 121 PhD students that are working with us, and now we have a good percentage of foreign PhD students, about 37, and as you might understand, PhD students are a very important part of the labor for doing research. And this diagram is just the pictures of the researchers with a PhD that we have in our center. Just one small piece of information, perhaps you are not so familiar with how research centers in Portugal are organized, but most of the research centers are not autonomous entities. They are associated to academic institutions. And our research center, CTS, is in fact a kind of an ecosystem involving researchers that are employed by different academic institutions. So most of us are employed by the Nova University of Lisbon, and others are related to some other academic institutions like various polytechnic institutes in the country. So the employers are the academic institutions, but we all have an agreement from our institutions to be together in one research center that is recognized then by the government agency for research. And UNINOVA is an institute that manages the activities of the research center. So far about myself. Now I would quickly move to the first topic of the presentation, that is what are collaborative networks. So I'm not sure about how much all of you are familiar with the topic, so I prepared just a few slides to show you what is involved and where we are. So the traditional example when people talk about collaborative networks is to present large projects in which a single enterprise, single organization could not do together alone. So they have to bring other companies, other organizations, form a consortium so that they can address this large project. An example could be a large construction such as an airport or a main bridge or any other large project in which you need different skills, different resources, and therefore you need to put together different partners in a network. And these networks typically last only for the duration of the project. After that, they might dissolve and perhaps later on be engaged in another type of networking. So this is a typical example. And what is studied in this area is analyzing who are the participants, partners, what are the relationships, for how long these relationships remain, and how do they work together. What can ICT information systems do to support the operation of these entities, the efficient operation of these entities in a network? Many examples can be shown about existing networks. The most traditional one that exists for dozens of years or maybe 100 years is the classical supply chain, in which you have really a network, but it's a very special network that's very well organized, in which the positions of each member is well defined with specific well-designed roles and so on. But nowadays we have many other types of networks, some of them more dynamic, more volatile. For instance, even in traditional sectors like the energy, since the energy moved from monopoly situation to a situation in which we have many operators. Also in this sector, we are observing the emergence of collaboration activities between the multiple stakeholders that are involved. Another area is, of course, in the manufacturing and servitization of the physical products. That means adding services to the physical products. So the business in this sector is changing a lot, and to make it possible, you need to combine the expertise and the approaches, the resources, the skills of different entities, probably located in different parts of the world, that have to come together. More than that, more and more we try to involve the customer in the process of design and creation of new products. So the terms of co-creation, co-innovation are also terms that are quite closely related to the notion of collaborative network. But you can also see this happening at the physical devices level. For instance, robot football is a good example of a collaborative network of intelligent machines. And we could also imagine that in the future, in the shop floor, when all the machines are becoming more intelligent, we can also replace the old notion of control and automation by collaboration among machines and people. Other examples, for instance, in the movie industry is a classical example where we have temporary networks of different entities that come quickly together to make a movie, and then they disassemble them. Some of them might be involved again for another movie, and so on. So it's a very dynamic sector in which you have temporary networks, one for each movie, But at the same time, you have a long-term environment that supports the agile operation of these entities. And this long-term environment is, for instance, Hollywood or Bollywood that put all together these entities, make them ready to very dynamically operate in a network. But this is not only these classical areas. More recent areas where networking and collaboration is becoming important is, for instance, in elderly care. Elderly is becoming a huge burden in our societies because the society is getting older in terms of percentage of the population. So the amount of support that is needed is becoming more and more. And we need to involve different organizations, either formal organizations and also informal organizations to give assistance to old people. Another area more recent that we have observed is even in journalism, that in the past was an activity for individuals. Now more and more they are joint efforts, and we all know about how consortia of journalists have been playing a growing role in our society, like football leagues and other initiatives that are really collaborative among different types of journalists that together they join efforts to make more consistent or at least more extensive research for their news. So there are many more areas in which you can observe this. For instance, for those of you that are less familiar with the area, I could suggest some documents from a Spanish group. I have a link here that have a good collection of examples in different sectors of industry where we have collaborative networks. And traditionally, it's also usual that people in this area mention that market turbulence is the main motivating factor for companies to come together, because companies, and especially in Europe, that we have a large percentage of small and medium enterprises, they are subject to many turbulence factors around them, like different crises, economic crisis. Now we have the COVID crisis, and in fact, many disruptive events that are stressing the way companies operate. So this can be seen as a great motivation for collaboration, in terms of giving the organizations, giving companies the capability to survive and to show resilience, not individual resilience, but resilience as being part of different groups in a dynamic way. And also, at the same time, give them the opportunity to find new business opportunities. That means, in fact, the disruptions that we can have in the environment, if properly taken, can reflect in a kind of anti-fragility of the networks. So in all these situations, what we have is different actors or different stakeholders that come together, typically for performing one project, and then they might not be together again after that project, but others might collaborate in different projects. So one goal for collaborative networks area or scientific area is to study how to organize these networks, how to support them so that you can make efficient management, efficient operation of such entities. So one simple definition of what a collaborative network is, you can say that a collaborative network is a network, so different nodes connected, and these nodes can be a variety of entities, can be organizations, so companies and other organizations, can be people, and can be even machines. More and more, we are applying the same ideas to networks of intelligent machines. But all these nodes are largely autonomous, are geographically distributed, they are heterogeneous, but still they collaborate in order to achieve a common or compatible goal. And nowadays, of course, all of this is supported through computer networks. But in this context of high turbulence in the market, in the society, with disruption all the time, One aspect that we could realize is that we can find many opportunities for new businesses, new opportunities for new collaborations, but usually these opportunities have one characteristic. You must respond in a short window of time. So there is a short window of opportunity for you to respond. So it's necessary to do a fast configuration of a consortium that can respond to opportunities. So after you identify an opportunity in the market, you should be able to very quickly organize a consortium of organizations so that they could solve or respond to this opportunity in an effective and successful way. But this is rather difficult to do this in a very fast way in general. So as a consequence, some years ago, let's say 10, 15 years ago, this research community analyzed the situation and could identify different cases. So, for instance, if you imagine that these dots at the left are the universe of existing companies in the world, when you need to form a collaborative network, you can consider several situations. For instance, if you are planning something in the long term, like a supply chain, when it is established, is at least hoped to last for maybe 20, 30 years. So we have a long term of operation expected. And in that case, you can afford to spend some time in the preparation of this network. So some supply chains might even take 1 or 2 years to be built before starting operation, because all this initial investment of preparation, you can recover later on. But this is true if the network is a long-term one. In very special niche sectors, in which there are only a small number of organizations working in that sector, it is typical that they use common technologies, they have similar business practices, so they are not so heterogeneous. In that case, the phase of preparation or creation of network can be quite fast, and it is possible to do it. But the majority of the cases is what lies here in the middle. So for this, what has come up in the last 10, 15 years is that we need some kind of intermediate organization. That means we need to select a subgroup of companies with which we want to collaborate in the long term. And for this, you will invest certainly 1 or 2 years of preparation for collaboration. But the idea is that now in the future, they are prepared to work together. And whenever they find a business opportunity in the market, they can very quickly form a subset of them to form a kind of dynamic virtual organization or dynamic virtual enterprise to quickly respond to this opportunity. And this can be done very quickly because now they know each other. So now they have built trust relationships. They might have built common infrastructures, common business principles. So it is feasible. So as a conclusion, in fact, this research community has evolved to consider 2 main classes of networks. So the long-term network that is called VBE, Virtual Organization Breeding Environment, is basically a kind of association, long-term association that was organized to have the members prepared to collaborate in future opportunities. And you spend maybe considerable resources and time to organize this, but after that, these members are prepared to work together, so they can very quickly, very rapidly select a subset of them to form a dynamic network that is focused on one specific project. For another project, you select another subset of this VBE and form another virtual organization in a very dynamic way. The same idea has been explored for freelancers or professionals that can work also on consultancy projects and so on. So you can imagine the creation of a long-term association that we call Professional Virtual Community. That is an association of different professionals that get ready to work in different projects together. And for each project, they have to select a subset according to the needs of the project. And this is what we call a virtual team. So, in fact, there are different types of networks, as I mentioned, two main groups. So, goal-oriented networks, and this includes things like virtual enterprise, virtual organization, or even extended enterprise, that some of you at least might be familiar with these names. It also includes virtual teams, that these ones focus on people, these ones focus on organizations. And we have the long-term networks that I call virtual organization breeding environment, or VBE, that includes as subcases other well-known organizations that you might be familiar with, like industry clusters or industry districts or business ecosystems, that in my perspective are all subcases of VBEs, depending on what we are considering. For instance, here I have two dimensions: regional, global, or single focus, single domain, or multiple domain of activities. But in fact, this is just the two main classes. We have tried to assemble or to organize a taxonomy of existing networks. So this is a more complete taxonomy. It's not complete in the sense that nowadays, with the evolution of technology, with the evolution of needs, and especially in the last year, with the needs imposed by the COVID, many new forms of collaboration are emerging every day. So I can expect that, let's say, many new subclasses of these main classes are emerging. Anyway, I want just to give you an idea that when we talk about collaborative networks, there are different types of structure or organizations. Some are long-term, some are goal-oriented, and there are even some that are quite of ad hoc. They don't have much organization behind them. They are more spontaneous, like flash mobs, mass collaboration, and so on. To give you, to put this in a kind of historic perspective, I would briefly show this diagram saying that, well, supply chains exist for many years. In the late 80s, beginning of 90s, the notion of extended enterprise became popular. It's a kind of network, but in which there is one dominant company that somehow imposes the rules for the suppliers around it. For instance, is what we have in the automobile industry, is typically this model. In the 90s, it was when people were mainly discussing single networks. That means networks oriented to a single project. And this was the time when virtual enterprise and virtual organization were mostly discussed. In the first decade of this current century, it is when this notion of VBE, virtual organization breeding environment, so long-term alliances to support the dynamic formation of virtual organizations, was mainly discussed during the first decade of this century. And now, the decade that we just finished, we moved to considering more the notion of ecosystems, communities, and the interplay among multiple networks, so that enterprises can in fact belong at the same time to multiple networks and be involved in very dynamic virtual organizations comprising members from these different structures. Also, these structures are evolving. So that's the type of topics that the community has been addressing in the last years. What about technological development and scientific development? Well, during the last 20 years, 25 years in which this area emerged, there have been some main development streams. I put some of them here. On one hand, there is developments in the scientific theoretical foundations. So many topics have interested the community, like how to model networks, how to model behavior of the networks, how to model the complexity that arises in these kind of entities and so on. And a lot of effort has been put on developing software tools, software platforms to facilitate the collaboration among members. And this has been classified according to the specific purpose of those platforms or tools. For instance, you can find a lot of work on tools to support the long-term networks management, tools to support the creation of dynamic virtual enterprises or virtual organizations, tools to support the operation of the virtual organizations, virtual enterprises, and also basic infrastructures in general, or collaboration platforms in general. So in all of these, many topics have been active, and for many of them, of course, we have solutions nowadays that are products that are usable, but there are still research in most of these areas going on. Just one word for this series of conferences that Rosanna mentioned, the Prof conference. So this is a conference that started in 1999, and since then we have been running it every year. So it's the most focused conference on collaborative networks. And this conference has in fact played an important role in the community in terms of helping to fix the terminology. So I guess at least my understanding is that Prof has played a major role in fixing the terminology that is used nowadays by researchers in this area, and also inspiring the research agenda for this community. And in this sense, we can see several main phases that trying to make a parallel with the revolutions of the industrial revolutions. We also talk about collaborative networks 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. Like in the first phase, it was mostly goal-oriented networks, then breathing environments, last phase, interplay among multiple networks, and now we are in the beginning of a fourth generation of collaborative networks that is not yet very clear what it is about, but we are discussing the levels of intelligence, distributed intelligence, making them cognitive systems, the hybrid nature of membership, like having machines, humans, organizations involved, and so on. So this was a very quick overview of collaborative networks. Now what I would like to spend some minutes is to try to convince you that collaborative networks can have a big impact in the ongoing industrial revolution and digital transformation processes. So all of you are very familiar, I'm sure, with so-called Industry 4.0, and this, you know that this is not really a new scientific paradigm. It's more a point of convergence of multiple initiatives that started along the years. Some of them are quite old, like artificial intelligence and many others. But what has happened in this last decade is that many of these things came together, became mature, and also got the political support of many institutions, so that created a kind of convergence among them. And of course, all of you are familiar with this kind of diagram that shows the various generations of our industrial revolutions. And for the Industry 4.0, initially people were mostly talking about cyber physical systems as the driving force or the main distinctive character, but very quickly other areas were added, like cloud computing, artificial intelligence, big data, and nowadays we talk more about digital transformation and many more issues. So to some extent, Industry 4.0 became a kind of hype or buzzword. From an academic point of view, I don't even like to use the term Industry 4.0 in my papers, my publications. I try to avoid it, and I convince my students to not use it much because it became so buzzword that even all politicians talk about it. But nevertheless, there are some important things. One is that it was possible to attract political support and financial support to industry. So it allowed to have some renovation processes in our industry, and also to motivate many people to come together. So it has a catalyzing effect on multidisciplinary convergence and opens new opportunities. So it's natural that besides the initial technologies that people were associating to Industry 4.0, like smart manufacturing, Internet of Things, cloud computing, so on, cyber physical systems, of course, there was a kind of Me Too movement from all or for many scientific areas, and many people that were working in different subjects, different topics, all of a sudden felt the need to say, I'm also part of this movement. And the same happened in the industrial world. All companies feel the need to say that we are modern, we are applying or implementing Industry 4.0. Okay, so in this context, we could also expect that collaborative networks community could also join this movement. But I think it's not just for being influenced like a Me Too process, but I really believe that collaborative issues are at the core of the digital transformation process that we need, or at the core of most of the issues that are organized under this label of Industry 4.0. And this is what I will try to briefly convince you. So if you consider the classical dimensions under which people analyze Industry 4.0, so three of them are more related to the manufacturing infrastructure, to the infrastructure supporting companies, in which you include vertical integration, horizontal integration, and acceleration of manufacturing. There are three other more related to the product or services, like the end-to-end engineering, digitalization, and smart products, or new business models. It's my understanding, and of many people in this sector, that collaborative networks can play a role in all these dimensions. So I will try very briefly to show you this message. So for the first dimension, in vertical integration, in fact, what we are observing lately is some kind of movement from monolithic systems. You had the shop floor, you had the manufacturing execution systems, you had the ERP systems in companies. All of these many of them were quite monolithic, and we are observing some trend towards transforming this into networked systems. So for instance, the shop floor can be seen now as an ecosystem or a network of digital twins representing the physical devices in the cyberspace. Also, we can see goal-oriented associations of these digital twins to perform different tasks instead of having rigid manufacturing cells and so on. And the higher levels of the company can also be seen as compositions of business services and federations of business service. So this networking effect is in fact obvious as the ultimate goal that we are moving to. So we are talking about systems of systems or collaborative ecosystems, enhanced human machine and human system interaction, scalability of connected devices, so ecosystems of smart entities, collaborative robots, and so on. So I believe that the principles, the knowledge that has been generated in the area of collaborative networks is a plus to better understand and facilitate this transformation process that's happening. The second dimension, that is horizontal integration, well, this is the more classical one. That is the one that has been more addressed by collaborative networks people, because always we talk about collaboration between enterprises and their suppliers, their distributors, and so on. So this has been quite addressed, but still there is a lot of emphasis now on the circular economy of the industry symbiosis and so on. So there are still many challenges, but in all of them, we definitely need collaboration along this value chain. So it's no doubt that collaborative networks are fundamental here at this level. Another area that is perhaps more or less discussed is the fact that a lot of new players came into the industrial arena as a number of new technologies or technologies that got new maturity recently, like artificial intelligence, collaborative machines, drones, advanced robotics, additive manufacturing, Internet of Things, cloud computing, biotechnologies, and so on. So all of this, in fact, brought in the industrial sector a lot of new players. And these new players also brought new ways of work and combined it with the facilities of the new technologies like mobile technologies, new interaction forms, and so on. So the proper way to consider now this context is again to look at it from the lens of collaborative networks, because we need, in fact, to make collaborative structures to accommodate all this new reality. When we move to the second part, that is products and services, one aspect is engineering of products and services. Well, all of you know the discussions from many years about concurrent engineering. That means the idea of putting the different departments in an organization to better collaborate, so internal collaboration to make more efficient design and manufacturing of products. But also then we can extend this to collaboration with the suppliers and collaboration with the customers. And nowadays it's very popular to talk about co-design, co-innovation, and even open innovation. So all of these are in fact networks of entities. And we have to consider this along the life cycle of the product, not just during the initial phases of design and manufacturing, but also during the usage of the product and recycling of the product. And for the different life stages of the product, we might consider different networks of organizations involved. So again, this is an area where we need to put into operation different types of networks. Another point that is nowadays quite interesting is the idea of digitalization of products, and especially the area of smart products, and the smart products that can be manufactured in distributed manufacturing systems. So in a way, you can imagine a smart product is something that is in fact assembled or built through the contributions of multiple companies, multiple stakeholders, that in principle could either interact directly to know what to do, or we can imagine or can think that some kind of history record associated to the smart product can move from one place to another place, so that the next stakeholder can check the history of the product so far and can know what to do next, and so on. So in fact, this is very interesting because it reminds us of processes that happen in nature, like with ants and bees and so on. So people are now exploring the ideas of what is called stigmergic collaboration, in which the interaction between the stakeholders is in fact done indirectly through the product that is passing from one to the other. Finally, the last dimension that I was mentioning is about the emergence of new business models. And recently, especially with the ongoing processes of digital transformation, this also gave rise to many new ways of generating value, and therefore many new business models are emerging. I have just here some examples. For instance, the servitization of products. That means associating business services to the product, physical products, or exploring customer intimacy and this is reflected in the areas of co-creation, co-innovation, or the notion of local enterprise, so enterprises that act globally but are also adjusted to the local specificities of each market, or the hybrid value chains combining profit organizations with social-oriented organizations, and also addressing social innovation aspects, and many others. So all of these, in fact, if you look at them carefully, you see that you need, in order to make this happen, you need to establish fluid collaboration among multiple stakeholders. That's why I believe that the contributions and all the knowledge generated during the last 20, 30 years in the scientific area of collaborative networks can be really a plus to help in all these sectors. And I like to see, usually I like to see this in a historic perspective. So, for instance, if you look at this diagram in which I'm showing the influence of information and communication technology just in the industrial sector, we can see that in some decades when informatics became more and more democratic, things were more around the shop floor, around the enterprise level, and many paradigms have emerged along the years. But more lately, we see this extending to inter-enterprise collaboration or integration, and even outside the enterprises to the society in general. So it is at this level that collaborative networks are more developing these days, but I really believe that the same concepts can apply at all levels, or all layers of the enterprise. And that's at least the kind of approach that we are trying to follow in my research group. So coming to this point, I would now only give you a very short overview of what we are doing in my group in this area. So initially I presented this global picture of my center, all the areas that my center is devoted. But besides my role as coordinator of the center, I have also my own research group, that is this group on collaborative networks and distributed industrial systems. And we are more located here on top of this cube. And we have been, in fact, along the years doing research on different aspects of collaborative networks. So we have been doing work on VBE management, so long-term networks, on creation of dynamic virtual organizations, applying these ideas to different fields, and also some theoretical work or foundational work. So I have one slide for each one of these to quickly show you. For instance, at the VBE management, one of the topics that we have been addressing, and I had some PhD students that have worked on this, was to better understand the benefits from collaboration and trying to come up with some theoretical model to help us identify indicators of collaboration so that we could measure. Of course, I'm not going to explain all these details, just to give an idea that a theoretical model of benefits is an important thing. And we also then try to apply it in an existing network of companies to show them. So each node here is a company, and the links reflect the interactions among them from two perspectives. The perspective of what each company contributes to the network and what each company receives from the network. And by using those indicators that I mentioned previously, and by making some simple analysis, it was possible to represent to these organizations how they stand. And the manager of the network was very happy with this kind of work, because then he could avoid a lot of discussion among members that were not happy, saying that they were receiving less opportunities. But he can show, okay, you are receiving less opportunities because you are also contributing less. For instance, this company 44 is not very interrelated with the others and does not contribute much to the community. Well, it doesn't receive much either, and so on. Another more theoretical work that we are doing, and again, I had a PhD thesis on this, was about emotions. So we know that in collaborative networks, we can have conflicts. We can have conflicts among partners, and very often these conflicts are because people are not satisfied, because there are some misunderstandings or some bad emotions emerge in the network. So what we tried to do in this case was we studied the subject of emotions from the different perspectives of psychology, sociology, and so on, and you try to learn with them how to address this. So we try to import or borrow their ideas and then try to apply to collaborative networks. So we have been developing a platform for simulation, and then we developed several models using system dynamic tools and so on to allow to monitor the status of a network without being intrusive, and trying to extract or conclude some variables or high-level indicators about the emotions that are going on in the network. So it's an interesting work. It's still a lot to be done, but is an example of how to combine knowledge coming from multiple disciplines that we can then apply in the engineering field. Another example of ongoing work, I have a PhD student that is still working on this, is to come up with a set of performance indicators that can help measuring the level of collaboration in a business ecosystem. So the first phase was to study all possible contributions from multiple disciplines, including social networks and business networks and so on. So based on this, this student elaborated a number of proposals for key performance indicators focused on collaboration. And now what she is doing is try to see what is the effect in the behavior of the companies by the fact that we select some indicators or give more importance to some indicators than we give to the others. So the assumption is that people and organizations in general would try to adapt their behavior depending on knowing how they will be evaluated, how they will be measured. So we assume that the selection of performance indicators and the weights that we give to each indicator can affect the behaviors in the bad way or in the good way. And the ultimate objective is to help managers of a business ecosystem to manage the ecosystem in a way that it remains sustainable in the long term. So it's another example of research. We did a lot of work, mostly in the past, now less, but about negotiation when creating virtual organizations. So we have studied how to select partners and what is the process of selecting partners until we create a network. And we put a lot of emphasis on negotiation, on building electronic contracts and having electronic institutions like an electronic notary to support these processes when we have geographical distributed networks. Another example that also combines knowledge from engineering, management, and sociology is to model the value systems of organizations. So the assumption is that the behavior of an organization to some extent depends on the set of values that this company has defined. So if you can model the set of values and the priorities that the organization gives to each value, and then if you can model also the influences of these values on each other, positive influences and negative influences, then we can have an instrument to analyze if we put together two companies, if there is a chance for them to work well, or if there is a large potential for conflicts. So again, this is a work that we have done. At the end of these slides, I can make the slides available to you later. At the end of these slides, I have some references where you can find some publications on each subject if you are interested in any of these topics, or otherwise you can contact me later. A similar or related work was about evaluating or estimating the readiness for collaboration. So how ready is an organization to be involved in a collaborative process? So again, we tried to combine knowledge coming from psychology and sociology. So we studied the various facets of behavior, and then we tried to use different models to make an assessment of how ready an organization is to be involved in a collaborative process. Now I will move to a few examples on applications in different domains. So besides industrial applications and manufacturing applications, we have been also working for some years in supporting elderly people. And for this, we have worked on modeling elderly care ecosystems, both at the level of software platforms to support the composition of services from multiple stakeholders to assist each old person. We also were involved in major road mapping at European level for this area of ICT and aging. And one example of a PhD thesis that I had in my group was a thesis to create virtual organizations of service providers to provide complete service packages for each old person. So we have to make a good match between the service providers, the services that they offer, and the needs of each person that are different from old person to an old person. And then we had some techniques to make the best match in order to find a good consortium to suggest. But besides this, this example is quite interesting because the needs of a person are not static. So as the person gets older, the needs evolve. So we also worked on the evolution of the necessary care services and consequently the dynamic evolution of the network of service providers to help these old people. Another area that we are working, not much, but I just have one PhD student exploring some ideas here, is on what is called mass collaboration. And this student is particularly interested in mass collaboration applied to learning communities. So mass collaboration is when we have huge number of members in a community collaborating to solve a problem together. But it's not a small networks of 10, 20 members, it's a huge number of members. That's why it is called mass collaboration. So we've been studying how to organize such communities, and the last topic that this guy, my student, is addressing is how to assess the reliability of knowledge created in such communities. That's a very hot topic nowadays. Another example of application area in which I'm involved is on applying collaborative networks principles to the energy sector. So the energy sector has been suffering in the last years a tremendous transition from the traditional energy grids to the so-called smart grids and collaborative smart grids. And I have a PhD student trying to put together the two knowledge areas. So on one hand, the collaborative networks and what collaborative networks bring in to the new needs of virtual power plants so that we can implement what we call collaborative virtual power plant ecosystem. So it's an ongoing work, but it's quite promising. So I really believe that collaborative networks can have an important role here. Now coming again back to manufacturing, we believe that the same ideas that we developed for networks of organizations and networks of people can be applied to networks of machines, especially when machines and physical components are becoming more intelligent. So we've been, and nowadays people talk about digital twins as intelligent representatives of the physical entities. So again, we can apply the same ideas of virtual organization, breathing environment, and virtual organization. You can make a good match among these and the dynamic formation of consortia of machines to solve one specific process at the factory shop floor. So this is one area of work, and complementarily we have been also working on methodology to design collaborative cyber physical systems, which is an ongoing PhD work. Now, finally, the collaborative networks and Industry 4.0. Yeah, this is a subject that has interested me, and in fact, this is a topic where I had collaboration with Rosanna, and together with other colleagues, we wrote some papers, a paper some years ago in a conference, and 2 years ago we wrote also a paper for a journal in which we tried really to analyze the merge of the two areas. So many of the things that I mentioned about the 6 dimensions of Industry 4.0 and how collaborative networks can help there, in fact, they are very detailed in some of these publications that we did together. Now I'm also working with some colleagues on extending this to the perspective of sustainability. So it's not only the link between manufacturing, smart manufacturing, and collaborative networks, but is also the link with the sustainability requirements. And we believe that, in fact, sustainability is a distributed responsibility when we have distributed manufacturing, when we have all these levels of networking. So it is important to understand how each member of the network at each level of the various dimensions that I mentioned can contribute to sustainability issues. So it's a recent topic, but I also believe it's quite promising. The last 2 slides that I have are about foundations, more theoretical foundations. So one of the works that we did some years ago was proposing a reference framework to help modeling the diversity of collaborative networks according to different perspectives. So we proposed this ARCON reference model that analyzes or helps the modeler to consider the life cycle of the network, the endogenous aspects of the network, that means the network seen from inside, including the structure, the components, the functions, the behavior, and also the interactions with the outside, the exogenous aspects like interactions with the market, support institutions, with the society in general, with potential members that they want to attract to the network, and so on. So this was a theoretical work, but still this reference framework has been used by different research groups around the world, which is a good result. And the last slide that I have is a more theoretical work that we have done recently, a couple of years ago. It is to look into what we can learn from nature. So we studied a lot of fields in other sciences like biology, ecology and zoology, so many other areas of natural sciences that have addressed the issues of collaboration among animals and plants and so on. And of course they use different terminology, they use different language, but after we understand their language, their terminology, we can see lots of similarities between what they do and what we need in the, let's say, these artificial constructs that we do in engineering and management. So in this work, we try to make this mapping, understanding how collaboration participants are organized in nature, the different types of organizational structures that you can find in nature, how they behave in collaboration situations, and how their behavior can be affected, and how can we facilitate collaboration, and how nature has created mechanisms to induce or to facilitate collaboration. And this was quite interesting because we could learn a lot of principles and a lot of ideas that I believe can be mimicked or can inspire our design of future collaboration networks. So sorry for taking so long. This was the brief, let's say, overview of all these topics. So I will be glad to answer questions. And of course, if you want to get more information later on, please be free to contact me and I will try to respond. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Luis, for the presentation. So you gave us a good overview of the collaborative networks and all the different applications that are possible in order to apply this kind of discipline and putting together different type of studies and considering different type of approaches and different type of impact that can have this discipline. So let me check. So maybe I can start with one question. You have, how can I say, you have analyzed the role of collaborative networks in several different areas. I was wondering what about the role of collaborative networks in this moment. In this, we know that in this last year everything has changed. So, do you think that the models that are available in literature or that you have developed till now can be useful to support the companies or the society in general to overcome some of the problems that we are facing now, and how? So.
Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I believe many of the results that have been developed by this research community along the years are in fact becoming more visible now, and perhaps the society is more willing to accept the need for collaboration nowadays. So this is obviously seen in many initiatives. So we can see that everything around the answers to COVID challenges, in fact, was done through collaboration. So many organizations now are working more closely together. And in all countries, we could see many, let's say, spontaneous initiatives of different organizations, companies, universities, and so on, coming together to find quick solutions for many issues. There is not yet, let's say, a systematic analysis of all these initiatives and how they performed and what they need better and so on. I have just the impression that we can also identify, after we make an extensive analysis of what's going on, what's happened during this year, we might identify a lot of, let's say, new ways of doing collaboration that were not anticipated years ago. And people were forced to be more creative in coming up with solutions that were not imagined before. So I expect, let's say, even from a theoretical point of view and scientific point of view, I expect that this can boost the developments in the next years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I don't know if the other colleagues have some questions or if somebody want to raise the hand. So.
Everybody got tired with my long presentation.
No, it was so. So another question is related to, from my point of view, is related to the fact that collaborative networks are involving not only the industrial world, no? They are not only related to manufacturing or to production, but they are more and more related to different fields of the society. Do you have the impression that the models, so there are some models that can be used both at the industrial level and at the societal level, let's say, so there are some way to collaborate that can be replicated either from one situation to another and vice versa. So do you see this possible contamination, let's say?
Well, not only see, but I really believe in it. On one hand, I can see that collaborative networks are in fact spreading to virtually any application domain. So if we look carefully, we can see in all domains, for instance, in construction, logistics, transportation, healthcare, insurance, education. So in all sectors, in fact, we can see this trend of more and more organizations being interconnected and acting together for solving more complex problems. So this is obvious, it's evident. Now the difficulties. Well, the difficulties are of different types. On one hand, collaborative networks is a kind of multidisciplinary area, or is let's say, a new discipline that tries to merge knowledge from different other disciplines. So in a way, it's an interdisciplinary knowledge area. And if you look at it from the traditional, or not traditional, the other disciplines point of view, you might look at it from the computer science point of view, you might look at it from the industrial engineering point of view, or the manufacturing engineering, or the economy, or the management point of view, or the sociology point of view. So all of these fields are paying attention to the area of collaborative networks. And one difficulty is that sometimes they use different terminologies. So the language, if it comes from separate disciplines, sometimes is not unified. When it comes to the people that identify themselves as researchers on collaborative networks, namely people around the SOCOLNet Society or the Prof conference and so on, I think that we have reached a good harmonization of terminology and concepts. But when we go outside this community and interact with other communities, sometimes they use different terminologies. Sometimes they are even reinventing the wheel. Because, things that we have done 10 years ago, 20 years ago, now they are starting to redo them again. So this is an obstacle. So the only way to solve this, I believe, is through education.
Yes.
I think it's necessary to put more effort in training the new generation of professionals with these concepts.
Yes. So if there are no other questions, I think we can close here. So I don't know, Paolo, if you want to add any other words, otherwise we can close here. So from my side, I thank you very much, Luisa, for accepting this invitation. So I know that you have your conference, your Prof conference, which is this year. It's in September or November. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So. So thank you again, and and we keep in touch. So of course you are available if anybody want to do any question or start any kind of collaboration. So we will send your contact to the colleagues. So thank you again, and see you next time.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.